Greetings again. This is your Hotep and Amani Kush from Brazil. And in our previous video, we established the Africanicity of ancient Kemet, the blackness of ancient Kemet. We established the fact, the historical and scientific fact, that the people of ancient Africa, the people of ancient Nile Valley civilization, which evolved into the name Egypt, that these were sub-Saharan, black, melanated people who created that civilization. Even though in later times, in a later, time period, after maybe 4,500 years, many of the people had become lighter skinned because of invasions and migrations of others into the country and so on and so forth, till you get to the point where you see the people in the northern part around Cairo and stuff like that, Alexandria, who look light-skinned, Arab or white and so on and so forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we established that the actual civilization, the writing, the science, the building of the pyramids, the various dynasties in the beginning, all of those were created by black Africans, right?
That's right.
So we sort of established that in our first video, and we had to sort of move because it was so hot that the camera, we're just working with a cell phone, so you got to excuse the sound of the wind blowing and maybe some background noise, but the information that we're giving is very important. And so right now, what we want to talk about is Kemetic Yoga itself. So when we say the word Kemetic Yoga, what are we talking about? Kemetic Yoga. And why do we use the word Kemetic, which we know that's an ancient African word, and yoga, and which we know is a word that supposedly has its origins in a place called India. So what is Kemetic Yoga? I'll let you talk about that first.
Okay. Kemetic Yoga is an ancient African art of movement, postures, and using your breath to cultivate energy. So we can see in the walls of the temples, you can see a lot of evidence of how these people has different practice to cultivate spirituality. And one of them is what the modern day people related to what we call today yoga. But we don't have the original name in ancient Kemet to say, oh, this is what they call yoga at that time. But we know that they use postures, they use movements, and they always try to show the symbolic meaning of the energy in the body. And this is the foundation of what we call Kemetic Yoga today. But we use the term Kemetic Yoga as a reference for the people to know what are we talking about in relationship to the practice itself.
Okay, that's a good explanation. But what I want to add, but I want to just add to that by asking the question, is yoga and is Kemetic Yoga movements and postures? And the question and the answer would be no. That is one aspect, the movements and the postures that we see in yoga, that we do in the practice of yoga, is only one aspect of what yoga really is. And in addition to that, when we look at the ancient Kemetic record, we see them doing different poses and different postures. We see their bodies in different positions. Some of them are very simple, and some of them are a little bit more challenging for most people to do. But the most important aspect of Kemetic Yoga is the idea of Ma'at. That's what I would say. The idea, all yoga, but you're talking about ancient African yoga, is based upon a philosophical and metaphysical understanding of the nature of the universe and our place as human beings within the universe. And who are we? What are we supposed to be doing? Why are we here? And those are the questions that our ancestors asked. And they created this philosophy, which we call the philosophy Ma'at. So how would you define the idea or the philosophy of Ma'at?
Well, I would like to say something about the art. You know, when it comes to Ma'at, Ma'at means truth, harmony, balance, you know, order. And the symbol of Ma'at, it was a woman with the ostrich feather on her head. And you have another concept, another principle, or you know, another force of nature in Kemet, which was called Shu. And Shu also has a ostrich feather on his head. So we can relate to that with how you cultivate Ma'at in your entire being. You must use your breath, and you always look to the image in ancient Kemet. They always put emphasis on the life force coming into the nostrils. This is my first time here in Kemet, and all the temples we can see the same thing, the Necheru, or you know, the principles and laws of the universe, the forces of nature, sending energy, sending life force to the rulers or the so-called kings and queens to their nostrils.
So what you're saying is, like, when we go to different temples, we see images on the walls of the interaction between the human being in the form of the king or the queen or somebody else, and they are interacting with divinity, the symbolic representation of divinity that comes in the form of a so-called deity. I'm using the word deity. I don't want to use that word, but just to make people understand, a deity, representation of a divine principle, right? And those representations of the divine, they are providing life, energy, and authority to the living person by sending this energy from the palm of their hand. So that, how do we know it's energy? Because we see the Ankh, which represents life, and we see the Was, if I'm saying that word correctly, which is the staff, which represents power, and it's moving from the palm of the divine source to the nostril. And we see all of these multiple images of all these different divinities sending this energy to the nostrils of the person. And so when you breathe, what do you breathe? You breathe with your nose. When you breathe in, what are you breathing in? You're breathing in something that the ancestors called Shu. And as Amani is saying, Shu, when he is portrayed in symbolic ways, he's portrayed as a human being with an ostrich feather on his head, just like Ma'at is portrayed as a woman, a human woman with an ostrich feather on her head. And she represents balance, harmony, justice, reciprocity, truth, and so on and so forth, right? Order, okay? And so these symbols, the interpretation of these symbols is where we gain our understanding of the philosophical and metaphysical and spiritual scientific foundation that underpins what we call Kemetic Yoga.
Yes, so another thing that I want to add to that is that in the spiritual science, you know, the history says for you to come to go to the afterlife, your heart will be weight with the ostrich feather. So for your heart to be light as a feather, you have to use a breath, because you can relate that to your nervous system, to your endocrine system, because everything is about the breath. The breath is the way you can influence all the functions of your body, and how your nervous systems operate, and how your different juices are being secreted in your body, and this changes all your consciousness and all your life. So for me, the breath is the more neglected aspect of our power. You know, we must to learn how to use the breath. And me, I can speak for myself. Kemetic Yoga came to me like and changed all aspects of my life, because I've learned how to use the breath. And you know, when you master your breath, you master all your life and all the aspects of your being.
Yeah, so for me, there cannot be any doubt that the ancestors really created practices that involve the control of your breathing, the control of your ability to breathe in slowly, to exhale slowly, and to use your breath to move and circulate the life force that you were born with freely throughout your entire body, and to utilize that movement of energy as a means of healing, balancing, changing the atomic structure of your body, the atoms being the small particles that make up your body, that change the cellular nature of your body, to affect cellular communication. Your cells in your body, they communicate with each other. That's how your body is able to coordinate all of its activities, because there was communication taking place. And so the breath was one of the key elements to the practice of any type of yoga, any type of meditation that occurred in the ancient past. And so our ancestors, one of the words that they used for this control of the breath, or for this entity that we call the breath, they use the term shu. And even when you say the word shu, shu, you know, you are using a term, you know, you're making a word that sounds like breath, right? That sounds like breathing, it sounds like air. And so in the earliest part of the creation story, we see Shu comes in, because Shu, in the beginning, before the creation, you had Geb, which was the earth, and Nut, who was the sky, and they were together in copulation. I call it holy copulation. And how did they become separated in order to start the process of creation? Shu had to rise up and separate them in order to create the atmosphere. And when Shu separated Geb, the male principle, from Nut, the sky, the female principle, then you started the whole process of creation. You started the whole process of what is called time and space. Okay, time began when Geb and Nut were separated by Shu. And think about it, you know, like this too. You can go for maybe 5 minutes without air, and you're going to die. So air, this invisible, we are in air now, is coming on us in the form of wind, and different natural forces causes the air to blow as wind. But we are surrounded in a medium of air, just like fish swim in the medium, which is the water, and they extract their oxygen from there. We exist in a medium called air, called Shu, the atmosphere. And we need this in order to live. Without it for 5 minutes, we would be extinguished, you know. And so we need to have this air. And so that's why the feather is worn by Shu. because that feather represents lightness. You want your lightness. You want your consciousness to be as light as the feather. You want your heart, your feelings, your emotions to be as light as that ostrich feather. That's why that feather symbolically is being weighed on the scales of justice, with the feather on one side and your heart on the other side. Not your physical heart, but your heart in terms of being a reflection of your consciousness, the things, the behaviors, the deeds that you have done while you were alive in life. And so this becomes the foundation of our yoga, controlling yourself, bringing yourself into harmony with Ma'at, observing the principles of Ma'at in the way that you live your life. You're living your life in a way that signifies justice, that signifies truth, that signifies balance, that signifies order, okay? Those are the things that are at the foundation of the practice of Kemetic Yoga. So how do we bring ourselves to the point where we are able to begin to give ourselves the self-control which is needed, the self-control in terms of the mental control and the control over our physiological impulses, right? In order to remain in balance with Ma'at, to not allow anger, anxiety, sadness, any type of emotion to take control over us. We have to control the what?
We have to control our breath.
The breath.
And that doesn't mean that you not get angry, you not get the so-called lower emotions. That means you feel it, but you not become it, because the breath allows you to release what is not necessary. And you know, one of the other things about the breath that I would like to mention very quickly is, as you said before, how the breath can help us to raise our vibration. Because one of the other great lessons of our ancestors was that everything is vibration, as long as ourselves. So when you use your breath, you can raise your vibration, and everything in your life changes also.
Yeah. So the things that we're talking about, we would need like maybe a year to go into each topic and to explore each topic thoroughly, to talk about it. And we're trying to do this in 15 to 20 minutes, right? So we're just trying to give you an introduction into the philosophical and the metaphysical foundation that underpins what we call Kemetic Yoga. And the reason why we say the word Kemetic Yoga and we don't have all kind of other words, because you know, one of the controversies or one of the issues that people bring is that, why do you say Kemetic Yoga? Why don't you say Simatawi? Or why don't you say this word or those words? And what I'm going to say is that we say Kemetic Yoga because we want the maximum amount of people to know what we're talking about. Okay, number one. So we don't want to use an obscure word to describe something that people won't know what we're talking about. So we made the decision that we're going to use the word Kemetic Yoga and to keep the word yoga there, because everybody knows what yoga is. Everybody knows that yoga is a philosophy, that yoga is a practice that involves movements and postures. So we begin there. But and the other thing is that even though you hear certain people saying certain words, that the ancient ancestors in Kemet used this word or this phrase and that phrase to describe the practice and the philosophy of yoga, there is no evidence of these pronouncements that people are making, right? So we can choose a particular word or phrase to say that from the Kemetic language, we choose to use this phrase or use this word to describe what we call yoga, but we cannot say that the people in ancient Kemet used that word to describe yoga, right? Because of many reasons. So what we choose in the Kemetic Yoga movement, which is a global movement of over 20,000 instructors and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of practitioners, we choose to use the phrase Wat Ma'at. W-A-T-M-A-A-T. Wat Ma'at. So if you force me to use a term that comes from Kemet, I would not use Samatawi, I would not use this, that, and the other. I would use the term Wat Ma'at, which means the way of Ma'at. Okay? And so that's the term that makes the most sense to me, because we are moving ourselves on a journey under the principles of Ma'at. And the way that we justify that is that we understand that whenever the night suit BT, which means the king of the upper and lower Kemet, or the Sarah, which means the son of the sun who appointed this king, who appointed this night suit BT, who gave birth to this night suit BT to be the king, we know that each one of those people had to take a vow that they were going to uphold the principles of Ma'at under all circumstances. And so if you was the king, if you was the prime minister, if you was the noble person, if you was the high priest, no matter what, if you had any type of authority or power, or even if you were just the husband and the wife, or whoever you were, you had to take a vow to say that I am going to uphold Ma'at. I am going to live my life by Wat Ma'at. Wat Ma'at. And so that's the foundation of everything, Wat Ma'at. So living by Ma'at. So when you live by Ma'at, when you behave in such a way that you treat people the way that they need to be treated, with kindness, with balance, with harmony, when you live your life with that way, when you feed your own body in the proper way, when you feed your children, when you live your life in such a way that you are living in harmony with nature, that is yoga. That itself is yoga. Even if you're not doing movements and postures and standing on your head, the way that you live your life in harmony, in balance, with justice, with truth, and you're living your life in such a way that you are trying to create a more beautiful world for everybody, that is Kemetic Yoga. That is what the way of Ma'at.
That's right, yeah.
So we're going to come back with more a little bit later. Hotel.